everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up. Thank you very much to everybody who reached out and said very nice things about show number 1000 and the accomplishment that is. One suggestion for that show was to post the interview that my friend Mark Nolte did with me when I was out in Iowa, but I was still a little queasy, a little uncomfortable about posting an interview with me until yesterday. All hell broke loose. I had to cancel all 3 guests that I was planning on talking to, 2 other calls, and several other things I was going to do because woke up in the morning and there was water under the flooring in the basement from the torrential storms that we had over the weekend. So I had to change course, canceled everything, ripped up the floor, went outside, got to the root of what I think might be the problem with the water coming in. If you've ever dealt with this as a homeowner, you know how stressful it can be. It's always a war against the water when you live on the side of a hill like I do, and I thought I had won the battle for a while. It is back. Hopefully I fixed it because I put in a solid 8 hours. I've got time-lapse videos if you don't believe me. And so here it is, the interview with me. I was kind of forced to do it because I didn't have something else ready. This was there on the shelf. I pulled it off. I think you're going to like it. I hope you do. Mark says he thinks listeners will love to hear it, and I hope you do. If you want to jump to it, Mark's conversation with me starts at about 24 minutes into today's show. But right now, time for news and notes. Reminder, March 22nd, 23rd, the Stand Up with Pete Dominic community will host our first gathering in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. Details to follow, but buy your tickets now. March 22nd and 23rd. If you haven't watched my brand new stand-up comedy special, it's called Professional Parent. It's on drybarcomedy.com/PD. Link in everyday show notes now. Real happy about that and have heard some real nice things from folks about that. If you want to book me to do stand-up or give a talk, then reach out. standupwithpete@gmail.com for anything at all that you need or want from me. Well, let's get to those headlines and audio roundup, news and clips. Well, the big story last night is that Donald Trump will not be on Colorado's presidential ballot. Colorado's top court, Supreme Court of Colorado, ruled Tuesday night that the former disgraced president is now disqualified from holding office again because he engaged in an insurrection leading up to the January 6th storming of the Capitol. It's an explosive ruling that injected more legal uncertainty into the 2024 presidential race and could put the basic contours of the election in the hands of the U.S. Supreme Court, because that's where it goes next. The 4-3 decision in the Colorado Supreme Court found that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which disqualifies from office those who engage in an insurrection against the Constitution after taking oath to support it, applies to Donald J. Trump, making him ineligible to be listed on the state's presidential primary ballot. Here is a roundup of reaction from legal experts I follow, as well as others. David Rothkopf says, you want to debate whether the 14th Amendment applies to Trump or not? Fine. But please spare me the takes that somehow it's a bad look for the United States to enforce its laws as they pertain to a president because it might be divisive. The law is the law. No one is above it. Noah Bookbinder, we just won the Colorado Supreme Court in our challenge to keep Donald Trump off the ballot as disqualified under the 14th Amendment for engaging in insurrection. A huge moment for democracy. More to come soon. Leah Littman, it's been more than 10 minutes since the Colorado Supreme Court issued the opinion disqualifying Trump, which means Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court has already decided to join whatever opinion will reverse that decision and put Donald Trump on the ballot. Steve Vladeck, whatever you think of the merits, it seems impossible to believe that this is the last word and that the U.S. Supreme Court won't now have to take up and resolve the question of Trump's eligibility under Section 3. Today's ruling forces the issue. Elie Mystal, I love how the Colorado decision directly quotes Neil Gorsuch's states' rights opinions. I mean, Gorsuch will probably turn into a sniveling hypocrite and reject his own argument, but it's a nice touch from his former stomping grounds. Neil Katyal, some are saying this is a 4-3 decision with 3 justices disagreeing. True, but much of the dissents are about Colorado state election law, which is irrelevant as this case goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court cannot second-guess the Colorado Supreme Court on its own law. What this means practically is that much of what the dissenting Colorado justices wrote is now irrelevant, and it is not something the U.S. Supreme Court can pick up to reverse the Colorado Supreme Court on. There are, of course, federal constitutional issues left, but a key focus of the dissents is now irrelevant. Eric Siegel, 3 of the current justices, Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, worked on Bush v. Gore for Bush. So calm down, people. Eric also says he thinks SCOTUS will reverse Colorado Supreme Court, but the one chance is that they may want to erase memory of Bush v. Gore. But 3 of them worked on it. So, again, that case is so doubtful. And finally, Siegel says this is a huge news. SCOTUS certainly has to take the case, but will they expedite? And now the Supreme Court will decide if Trump is disqualified. Hint, he won't be. And, of course, the MAGA world is calling for civil war. JoJo from Jers tweets, the fuck your feelings crowd sure as shit is triggered by their rotting gourd god getting kicked off the ballot in Colorado. John Fugelsang, I totally support Trump spending millions of dollars to overturn the Colorado Supreme Court before losing all of Colorado's electoral votes anyway. Rob Reiner, the Colorado Supreme Court, stating the obvious, has ruled that Donald Trump, having engaged in insurrection, be removed from the ballot and be barred from holding public office. Nice to see a little sanity poking its head up. Colorado has 10 electoral votes, and that would narrow Donald Trump's path to the White House. Will it create violence and insurrection? Will the Supreme Court overturn it? A lot still remains to be seen. Obviously, we'll be following that story very closely. Colorado Supreme Court kicking Donald Trump off the ballot for leading an insurrection. Well, believe it or not, there is other news, and let's see. Kevin McCarthy's exit became official yesterday. The House clerk read the former speaker's resignation letter during a brief pro forma session, which indicated his final day as a member of Congress is December 31st. He will not be missed by anyone, apparently, according to recent reporting from all media outlets. He's got no friends. How about this? My governor here in New York, her name is Kathy Hochul, signed a bill that will create the nation's 3rd statewide task force on reparations for slavery. Really interesting development here in New York, an ambitious effort to address the state's history of slavery and racism, establishing the United States' 3rd statewide task force to examine whether reparations can be made to confront the legacy of racial injustice. New York joins California and Illinois at the forefront of reparations effort. Of course, New York Times writes, a complicated endeavor that will immerse stakeholders in a contentious political and budgetary conversation about the past and its dictates for the future. And the ACLU is suing Texas over their new controversial immigration law that would allow police to detain migrants who illegally cross the U.S. border and authorize judges to order their deportation. Well, that didn't take long. I mentioned that story yesterday, and the ACLU has immediately filed suit in the federal district court alleging that the bill is unconstitutional, runs foul of the federal immigration law, and the legislation, of course, is just the latest in a series of efforts by Texas Republicans to test the limits of the state's authority to tighten border security, stem illegal immigration, and be as cruel as they possibly can to their fellow human beings, to keep them out of America, because they're poisoning it, of course. Britain and France yesterday reiterated their determination Tuesday that Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine will end in failure. The UK foreign minister said that Ukraine's allies must better leverage their economic might to vastly outmatch Moscow's war machine. Now, if only Republicans and U.S. were on the same page with our allies, Well, how about this? U.S. Steel agreed to sell itself to a Japanese company, Nippon Steel, for $14 billion, capping months of speculation about the fate of the American industrial heavyweight. The 2 senators from Pennsylvania have both said they'll do everything they can to stop that sale, but I'm not sure that that's something a U.S. senator can do. Let's head to Nevada, where 6 Republicans, including the state party chair, Michael McDonald, pled not guilty in a Clark County court on Monday to felony charges brought after their attempt to pledge the state's electoral votes to Donald Trump following the 2020 election, despite President Joe Biden's victory in the state. Yeah, these phony electors, they got caught again, this time in Nevada. Terrible news coming out of China, where the death toll up to 127 because of a strong earthquake and series of aftershocks that have struck a mountainous region in northwestern China. And now we go to Iceland, where after weeks of anticipation, you probably know about this, you've seen the videos, the pictures, a volcanic eruption in the country's most populated area sent lava spewing into the night sky. Lava continues to spew from a volcano in southwestern Iceland. Local officials said it does not present a threat to life. If that volcano were in America, it definitely would be, because stupid Americans would be running all over it, trying to surf on the lava and any number of other stupid things. And one more final story here. The state of Colorado, let's finish where we started, but on a different note, released 5 gray wolves into public land, part of an effort to restore a permanent population. This is a pretty big deal amongst wildlife experts that have been working to repopulate the gray wolves in Colorado and other states for a long time. All right, those are your headlines. Let's get to some of the audio clips I've got for you. First, here's Elie Mystal on why it's no accident that the Colorado Supreme Court directly quoted Justice Neil Gorsuch in their decision to disqualify him from the 2024 ballot. Here he is on MSNBC last night.
What's your first thought about this headed to SCOTUS?
Why do you think the conservatives would overturn Colorado? I mean, woo! States' rights, brother! I mean, isn't that what the conservatives usually... Look, of course the Supreme Court is going to weigh in and likely overturn the Colorado State Supreme Court's interpretation of Colorado state law, because the conservatives on the Supreme Court, who usually go on and on and on about states' rights, are hypocrites. And they are comfortable being hypocrites, and they
Correct.
will be hypocritical in this situation, and they will overturn Colorado's own state court process, but they shouldn't. And when you're talking about writing this decision and what it must be like for the state court judge, I would like to point out that they were so aware of what SCOTUS was about to do in terms of bending over backwards that they literally quote Neil Gorsuch. Neil Gorsuch, when he was sitting on the federal circuit in Colorado, they quote Gorsuch for the opinion that Colorado gets to decide its own rules about who is qualified or not for the ballot in Colorado. That's a Gorsuch opinion that they quote in the thing. So if Gorsuch had any logical consistency, he would likely uphold the Colorado State Court opinion. But what we're about to see is just how again, hypocritical and unserious the Supreme Court is when it comes to protecting their partisan sugar daddies like Donald Trump.
Nailed it, as he always does, and I'm not sure we need much more on that until tomorrow. I'll be reading a lot more about it, but I think he is likely right. All right, let's switch gears and check in on a piece of commentary that went pretty viral, pretty powerful from CNN anchor Jake Tapper, who tore into ex-President Donald Trump's weekend speech in this stunning commentary, as Mediaite puts it, not just comparing it to the language of Adolf Hitler, but laying out the violent consequences of such rhetoric.
Republican reactions to Trump's latest words on immigration have, not surprisingly, been mostly muted, aside from former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who told me that those words were, quote, disgusting. Sitting Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who used to be quite active in trying to push immigration reform, he doesn't seem overly concerned.
We're talking about language. I could care less what language people use as long as we get it right. I believe in legal immigration. I have no animosity toward people trying to come to our country. I have animosity against terrorists and against drug dealers.
Graham is dismissing words from Donald Trump as inconsequential. And, you know, maybe they are to you, maybe they are to me, but we have seen Mr. Trump's words become calls to action. On January 6, 2021, of course. But don't forget the climate of the 2018 midterm elections. The Donald Trump Fox warnings about this caravan of migrants, terrifying migrants, funded by George Soros, they said. It was rhetoric, mere words, but it dovetailed nicely with the very racist Great Replacement theory that Jews are funding migrants to come to the United States to replace the white people of the United States. It's a sick, twisted conspiracy theory. But they're just words, right? A conspiracy theory, just words. But they become, to some sick minds, calls to action. And right in the middle of that campaign, October 27th, 2018, the Tree of Life Synagogue massacre. 11 Jews killed. The deadliest attack on Jewish Americans in the United States history. But even that shooting did not stop Trump from continuing to fuel these deranged rumors. Just days later, he suggested that wealthy financier George Soros, who is Jewish, may have been actually paying for the migrant caravan. No record of this, no proof of this, but he said it anyway. Rhetoric inspired bloodshed. Meanwhile, continued. So that was 2018. Flash forward, August 3rd, 2019, the El Paso Walmart shooting. 23 people killed. And this sick white replacement theory continues. May 14th, 2022, the supermarket shooting in Buffalo, New York, 10 killed. All of those murders were inspired by these mere words.
All right, powerful stuff from Jay Tapper connecting the president's rhetoric, the former president's rhetoric, to some of the violence that we've seen play out and will probably continue to. Terrible, terrible stuff that we're hearing from him right now, and it's a scary time, way that he activates people. I thought this was a really interesting clip. This is also on CNN, Aaron Burnett's show. This is a software engineer who was hired by Donald Trump and the Trump campaign to investigate claims of voter fraud in the 2020 election. And he said, even though he was hired by Trump, and he said this in court as well, that every instance he investigated was false. After 28 recounts and 14 audits, they found actually more votes for Joe Biden. Here's that minute from CNN last night.
I really appreciate us speaking to you, and I know you took your time to figure out if it was the right thing to do for you to speak out. But you were hired by Team Trump to investigate voter fraud, and you were focused, I know, on the 6 key swing states, one of which, of course, we were just talking about, Arizona. So what was the bottom line from everything you looked at, Ken? Did you find the widespread fraud they wanted you to find?
Well, thank you for having me on, and good evening. And no, in my job looking for voter fraud for the campaign, we didn't find enough fraud to have impacted the result of any election in any of the swing states that we took a look at. But much more importantly, the campaign asked me to look at claims of fraud that other people were making, and these claims were coming in fast and furious in the 30 days after the election. My team looked at approximately 15 or so claims, every one of which we were able to prove was false. Every one of which. I mean, and as you say, you were inundated.
All right, there you go. That's from Aaron Burnett last night. I thought that was pretty important piece of audio for people to hear. I wonder what the reactions to that will be from the MAGAs, the election deniers. And let's do one more. How about this? It's Kathy Hochul. I mentioned earlier that she's signed legislation to create a board to study reparations for residents of African descent. And here's about a minute 30 from her comments unveiling this yesterday.
Now, in New York, we like to think we're on the right side of this. You know, slavery was the product of the South, the Confederacy. We're proud of the legacy of incredible warriors for justice and liberation and the thousands of New York soldiers who went to fight these battles on the right side of history in the Civil War. We're proud to be home of courageous leaders like Harriet Tubman, conductor of the Underground Railroad, buried up in Auburn, New York, to Joyner Truth, Frederick Douglass, and abolitionists like John Brown, whose farm is way in the North Country. We're proud to embrace the deliverance from slavery from the Underground Railroad itself, which ran from New York all the way to Canada, crossing over in Niagara Falls, where I was yesterday. And that had the strong support of many good and much goodwill from residents of this state. So it's easy for us to pat ourselves on the back, right? We did all this. A lot of other states didn't step up. We had the leaders here. We took this on. We can say we're the heroes. We're the ones who fought against slavery. And indeed, many did. What is hard to embrace is the fact that our state also flourished from that slavery. It's not a beautiful story, but indeed it is the truth.
Well, there you go. Just a minute 30 brief segment from Kathy Hochul's powerful speech yesterday, and we'll see what happens here in New York. And finally, how about a little bit of comedy to end the news segment, because I don't want to get you down. Remember, all the thing reported in the news, they're the aberrations. We don't talk about all of the goodness and all of the love that happens second to second all over and between us. All right, here is Stephen Colbert, who was back last week after his appendix burst, and we're very happy to have him. A couple minutes from his monologue last night.
It's my favorite time of the year. It's the season of love and joy. And there's big love news from the world's least eligible bachelor, Pope Francis. Seen here cosplaying as his favorite chess piece. Well, this is just today, right? Moment time. Just earlier today, his popiness announced that priests would be allowed to bless same-sex relationships. Wow. Wow. Holy cow. Bravo, Pope Francis. It's about damn time. Now, who knows? Who knows? You know, that's very exciting. Who knows? Now that the door's been opened, maybe someday we'll finally see a gay priest. Now, this new policy was announced today, and instead of with an encyclical, the Vatican just released rainbow smoke. And it was very exciting. It's good to kick off the season that way. And it is December 18th, and it's beginning to look a lot like fascism, thanks to Donald Trump. Over the weekend was this New Hampshire? In New Hampshire, he had some pretty disturbing things to say about immigration.
You know, when they I think the real number is 15, 16 million people into our country. When they do that, we got a lot of work to do. They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done.
Poisoning the blood of them. That is absolutely disgusting. Also not true. The blood of our country is not being poisoned by immigrants. It's being poisoned by dipping pizza in ranch dressing. The statement is horrifying in and of itself, but it gets even worse when you realize the term blood poisoning was used by Hitler in his manifesto, Mein Kampf. Now, as you can imagine, people are upset that he's quoting a genocidal maniac in his stump speeches. But a Mike Pence aide defended Trump saying, I think it's highly unlikely that Donald Trump has ever read Mein Kampf. Right. Because it's a book. He probably got the version with pictures, Mein First Kampf. Now, that's also upsetting. It's also a very upsetting image. Very upsetting image.
All right, there you go, Stephen Colbert. And now it's time for the conversation. And this is a very different one. After 1,000 shows, I was asked to be interviewed for my show. One of my longest listeners and closest friends I've made through the program is Mark Nolte. Mark is a real great guy, family guy, 5 kids out in Iowa. He and his wife, Leslie. He has worked in several different jobs over the time I've met him, including in economic development. At one point, he flirted with a run for governor of Iowa. I've known Mark to be a really generous, thoughtful, giving, very smart guy. He was also a super talented musician and well-known, well-liked, well-respected in his community. He's done so much for me over the years. He's been very, very generous with his time, with his money, with his friendship, and with his support. And so when I went out to Iowa back in September, he said, you know, I'd really love to interview you. I think listeners would love to hear some of the questions I have, and I've known you for a long time, and I think folks would like it. And I said, I don't know if I want to do that, Mark. And well, we recorded it because it certainly was fun to do for me, but it was also unexpectedly enlightening because Mark asked some really good, tough questions that I think I hadn't quite grappled with, some that I have, and talked out a little more. It was kind of like a therapy session, but also I feel like you get a better understanding of who I am and how I've dealt with some of the adversity in my life over the past couple of years and how that might help you. So much of what I have done, I've learned from you and your experiences in life as a parent, as a husband, as a friend, as someone who's self-employed now. You guys have been such an amazing community and support group for me and now for each other as well. So here it is, ladies and gentlemen, my friend Mark Nolte and I sitting in my hotel room in Iowa City, Iowa, back in September for a very, as personal as it gets, conversation with me.
All right.
Let's go. Let's roll.
So we're going to turn the tables on Pete today as one of his listeners. I've been listening for 18-ish years or so since I first leased a car that had Sirius XM or whatever it was back in the day. And we've gotten to be friends over the year. I feel like I know a lot about you, but I think for your listeners, there's some things we want to learn more about. So, and the run.
Do you really think there are things that people really? I don't even think.
You've built a community that cares deeply about you.
Yeah, and I care deeply about it, and I wonder if I don't share enough. I wonder if there really is an itch. Like, is there really demand?
There is
for these questions. But I'm happy to talk about myself.
In the run up to 1,000, your 1,000th show.
Yeah.
Which is a crazy milestone. There's some things
Let's go.
All right,
Ask me anything.
How did you get started in comedy?
Well, high school was an audience, and I never missed a day. And I made jokes in class. I did the talent show where I didn't have any talent with like music, singing, or anything like that, which is what most people do at a talent show. I was like, let me host it. I'll host the talent show. I pitched myself as the host. You need a host. I'll be the host. And within that, I did impressions of Dana Carvey's impressions on SNL at the time. And that was my junior year of high school, and I performed in front of the entire school. I was already pretty well known, pretty well liked, but after that day, that was it. And then the next year, same talent show, similar impressions. My brother wrote the scripts for all of those, and I was on my way. I mean, one interesting story about that is, though, my senior year when my brother was still actually living at home, and he had quit using drugs, but he hadn't gone to rehab yet, and it was a mess. My parents had kicked him out the day before the talent show, and I didn't have a script yet. I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't have any jokes. I can do the impressions, but what am I going to say? I wasn't able to improv at that point. Certainly wasn't confident. I needed a script. But my brother had been kicked out in dramatic circumstances as the result of him using, I don't know what he was using at that time. And I didn't know what to do. And the next morning I woke up, and out in the garage door, there was a full script, loose leaf paper, longhand, as you did in those days, for me. He left that for me. And I killed that year with that script. And he was in the back of the audience watching. And so that was it for me. He was always like a silent partner. And he still is in a way, morally. And that's when I knew I wanted to do comedy for a living, was in high school. And I barely even wanted to go to college. I barely got into college. But during those 2 years, more stand-up, other performances, college experience. Then I moved to New York City, went to an acting school. But right away, first week I was there, I was doing stand-up, because that's all I really wanted to do at that point.
How did you end up at Sirius then? Or whatever it was called at that time?
Yeah, it was Sirius, and XM was a different company. And I was invited to be on this show in the Comedy Channels as like a panelist. And then I was invited to audition to be a host for a new comedy daily show on their Comedy Channel that was going to air live at noon. I auditioned against a bunch of other great comics, all of which are pretty well known now, and I got it. I got that gig. It was $75 a day, but I hosted a live radio show on the Comedy Channels for, I guess it ended up being 3 years. But at some point, the merger happened, and I really wanted to host a talk show. I was always very interested in politics, and I wanted to host an independent political show, kind of nonpartisan, just interviewing experts. And I pitched it, and I did a demo for it while I was there already. Once you're in the door, and I always try to tell this to young people and my kids, once you get an ID, exploit it, knock on every door, meet every person, and you create opportunities for yourself. And so I did a demo I gave to this guy who was starting a new political channel, and they hired me, and I went from $75 a day to, I think at that point it was $60,000 a year. But to me as a comedian, I'm still doing tons of stand-up. I was still working at that point. I was, I think, probably at the Colbert Report and the Daily Show. I was doing really well, but to me, that was health insurance for my family, and that was it. And that's where I knew that I wanted to live out my days of work on the radio, talking about politics and important issues that mattered. And, one thing led to another, and CNN, and, 5 contracts there. And it was amazing ride and experience that I had in all of corporate media. So
what were the pros and cons of that part of your journey? You had a team, you had people? What was good? What was bad about it?
There wasn't a lot of bad. The bad was the time required, and to a certain extent, the commute was terrible for my lifestyle. I think that if you don't have a commute, like you don't really, like a few minutes, like you're rich. I don't care what your salary is. If you go to work, you have a job that you like and you're making all right money, and there's not a huge commute, or you can even do it from home, that's such a big deal. So I had this horrible commute, which was really bad for me, for my health, for the time, took 2 hours out of my life and my day with my kids. But obviously, then there was just corporate bullshit, but I liked that. I liked corporate politics. I was really good at it. I was very good at making people like me and creating relationships with executives and creating initiatives and partnerships and mentoring young people. Like, I loved working at Sirius. I loved working at CNN. I loved working at Comedy Central. All those jobs, there were very few downsides when you get a job in entertainment or media, in corporate entertainment or media these days, even much less then, it's a pretty big deal. And for me, I had autonomy, which most people don't have in corporate media. I had nobody ever telling me at SiriusXM. Yeah. It wasn't the case at CNN or MSNBC or other places I've worked. But no one ever told me what I had to say, hardly at all. Sometimes executives would be like, could you interview this person? My friend has a book out or something. But rarely. And the president of the company once asked us to interview Harvey Weinstein, but my producer at the time, to his credit, was like, he's a bad guy. I know a lot of things, and we can't say yes to that. So we didn't. But I had a lot of autonomy. I could do whatever I wanted. I had editorial control, not only over my show, but then eventually almost over a channel, and the people who ran it almost basically worked for me. So it was a unique situation. It was a great situation. Obviously, in the end, I had differences with executives, and we didn't see eye to eye. But that was always destined to happen. Like, I didn't, do anything wrong. I think, if anything, I played that pitch perfect, that job, that company, because I was able to really get contract after contract by introducing new ideas and constantly getting attention from me, for the channel, for the company. And so I think I sucked it dry to the point where there was nothing left. And there wasn't anything left because the people they hired after me don't work for Sirius. They get paid through the average. It's not a great deal to have. I mean, media in general, but certainly in radio, there's not a lot of money. And in this case, they were paying me pretty good money. I was really happy with the salary I ended with. It was awesome. But once I was gone, they stopped paying a ton of people, basically.
So you were on the air with your team. How did you enjoy that? Because it felt like at the end there was sometimes tension between...
Yeah, in the end there was tension because after 8 years working with my producer Alfred, who I had an amazing relationship with, and personally and professionally, like, it started to erode that relationship, which both of us can take, the blame for that. But like, no one did 8 years together like he and I did. We were great together, and I think he was... we both had a lot of issues with the channel, with the company that, we could never really get addressed the way that we wanted to necessarily. And so they let him go while I was here, actually. I remember I was in Iowa, and I was really, I thought that might happen, but I thought they'd find another place for him. And I was, devastated for him at the time. He just had a baby. He just come back from leave. And then it was me and two others.
He felt like you were part of that, right? Didn't he blame you a little bit at the beginning?
Yeah. I don't think, his narrative of it is quite different from my narrative. And this is where, when we record it, I'll be as fair as I possibly can, and when privately, I'll share my narrative. And he would, probably want to share his. But we have different versions of kind of how that happened. But I was devastated. I cared about him deeply, but it wasn't my choice. And arguably, I would say I did everything I could to try to help him get a job on a different show, different channel. But then 6 months later, they did the exact same thing to me that they did to him. So, part of I think he had to go. Somebody had to go from my team because I knew that the budget, I had 3 producers, most shows had 2. I knew for me to continue working there, for the 4 of us to continue working there, one of us had to go. You know more about that than a lot of people. A lot of people understand to keep the business going, we can't pay all these people. And I knew what it looked like. My show's budget versus others. So one of us had to go no matter what. I just thought that person would go to another channel. And I also thought in the end there might be a chance for me to go to another channel because they were killing my channel with my contract. But there was that didn't occur, obviously. So yeah.
So fast forward, was it November of 19?
Yeah.
So not only does that ride end, but your dad has a major health issue.
Yeah.
Right at the same time. When you reflect on that now, what do you take away? When you reflect on that period of time?
Well, I really appreciate you remembering and recognizing that. I wouldn't expect anybody to remember that. So that means a lot to me that you do. When I reflect back to that, I think it's hilarious when people use that phrase, God will never give you more than you can handle. I'm not a God person. I'm not a religious person. But the idea that life is not going to give you more than you can handle is hilarious. Of course it is. For some people, every day. But for me, that day and that time, I mean, when I got the call that my dad had a heart attack and rushed in an ambulance, I was in my yard and I fell down to my knees, which has happened to me like a few times, and it's very indelible in my mind because I physically fell down. Your legs just kind of give out. And I was like, well, how am I going to do this? I just lost my job and I might lose my dad. Like, how am I going to do this? And it was really a challenging time in my life. My dad recovered amazingly well, and I have recovered amazingly well. But that time in my life, Mark, I think about it every day. I still miss a lot about that job and that atmosphere and that energy and what it did for my ego. There's a lot that I miss that I have yet to get really probably closure on. But I think the most important thing for me was that I loved my work and I wanted to keep doing the work. And the core of the work was that I get to interview people who are really smart, and my curiosity is on display, and I get to make a living, learning about things from smart people. So I've been able to continue that. And that, we're kind of just scraping by here at Stand Up with Pete Dominick, but it is amazing that I've gotten this far, because it was the one time I didn't believe that I was going to be successful in my career. And I remember talking to you. I talked to a lot of people that time, but I remember talking to you, and you told me, you're like, it's going to work out. You're going to do this. You're going to have a lot of success with this. And I was like, I don't think so. And you're like, yeah, you are. You just can't see it yet. I think a lot of people who knew me and supported me and would listen to the show knew that I had to do it, that I would do it, and that they would support me. And that I think that there are a lot of others that would too. And that has been the case. You were right. You were prophetic. And I'll never, I'll always be grateful to you specifically for that moment, because I couldn't see it. And you knowing me the way that you knew me, you could, and others could, but you were the one who told me that. And that really helped at that time a lot. Still does.
I remember that conversation. And I want to talk to you about your growth more, but looking at that part of life, that period, when you reflect back, how did self-pity affect how you responded to that?
Well, as you know, that's something I've been thinking a lot about. And I don't think I've thought about how self-pity affected me then as much as I've been thinking about how it affects me now. So I'd have to think about that. But I think a lot of what happened during that time was I didn't have time to stay in wallow for too long. I was working that much. I was learning how to use software. I was learning how to use the internet, how to post a podcast. I was learning everything about producing, editing a podcast, because I didn't want to hire somebody and I couldn't afford it. And so I was so busy, I think, that I don't know that I was stuck there. And then it really started to grow, and then I really started to get excited. And so I think, I don't know what role it played then. I just know what role it's played overall, and I know what role it's played recently as a result of my work, my daughter leaving, issues with my marriage, and I know that it's been a really corrosive idea for me, something that I have had to deal with and discover, self-pity. And I think there's a lot of men that have gone through similar things as me, and that you've had a really good run, and then the things come undone, things come apart, things fall apart, and you have no idea what you're going to do, and you're terrified, paralyzed, depressed, suicidal for some people, all the bad things and you don't know how to negotiate them. You don't have resilience. You never needed it. You had an amazing life. You grew up on Bellflower Circle, riding bikes and skateboards and playing in the woods and in the creek and catching crayfish. And then you played sports with your friends, and your parents stayed married, and you didn't have any serious tragedy, and poverty was not even remotely a thing, even though you couldn't have whatever you wanted because your dad was cheap. You had a great life. You went skiing. You had a season pass. You went to college. You went to New York City. You followed your dream as a comedian. You succeeded as a comedian in every way. You met an amazing woman. You had 2 amazing daughters that you raised, and for the most part of their lives, you had a great financial deal because of the corporate media that I worked for. And then boom, bomb, all gone. Almost all of it. All the good stuff. All the things you could count on. All the predictability. All the certainty, the work-life balance that most people never achieve. I not only achieved my dreams career-wise, ego-wise, I interviewed all the girls that we grew up loving on TV, Mark. Alyssa Milano,
Winnie Cooper,
Danica McKellar, Jewel, you name it, Elizabeth Shue. I mean, I did everything I wanted to do, and I loved it. I brought my daughter to interview the co-directors of the Avengers, and she's now in film school. Like, I did it all. And then it was gone. And I had no idea how to deal with it because I'd never had a really hard time. I had my issues. I can talk about my pain as a young 20-year-old but life worked out for me, and then it didn't, and I had no idea what to do. And when you come from a lot of privilege and then you are up against it in a corner and you're in your 40s and you lose your job, alcohol becomes your friend, drugs become your friend, loneliness becomes your friend. It's really bad for a lot of us. And so I've had to dig myself out of that, and now I'm in a really good place in almost every way. But financial security is the one thing that keeps me scared and anxious. But I have a practice to deal with that. In my mind, when I have those thoughts, I have a practice to deal with that.
So you had the courage to start this podcast.
Yeah, I was so courageous.
But you picked up where you left off. You had a network of amazing people that you can tap into. Right. Your guests are just as good, if not better. I think you can build more relationships.
Sure.
Sirius would not have let you bring in, Christian every week, probably.
They wouldn't have let me do a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, one of the most important guests that's regular now is Tim Wise. And my producers didn't love Tim Wise. And I have some regret about, not fighting that battle for him at the time. He was on regularly. That's true. All that's true.
And you touched on this. You had to prove your resiliency. So what have you learned about yourself over the last few years? What are you proud of? I've learned that life can get really a lot more difficult than I had experienced. I would interview people about dealing with depression and anxiety. I would talk with young people who are going through things. I would mentor a lot of people, young producers of mine, interns, in many different ways. And I would always come from an on-high position. And then there I was at the bottom of the mountain going, what the fuck? What am I supposed to do? All of the things I know are not really helping me. And I dug really deep into philosophy, Buddhism and Stoicism, and I always knew a good bit about it and had it as part of a bit of a practice. But I basically developed coping mechanisms and relationships, I think, probably more than anything. I learned a lot about how to fight the dark moments. I use specific words around it, depression, and ways to describe it, because I think it's so different for everybody. But I had a lot of darkness, but I always got out of bed. And I went to therapy. I went back to therapy. Went to a few therapists, 3 different ones. And one guy who was a cognitive behavioral therapist shortly after I lost my job, we had a good session, good talk. He's a good guy. And at the end, he's like, are you doing any cardio? I was like, not really. And he's like, cardio is really good to fight the anxiety. And I was like, all right.
And I knew that. I was a personal trainer. I knew that intuitively, but I never needed it to fight anxiety. I did it to help me be creative. I just felt good for
look good for chicks.
To look good for chicks, for sure. To look good, period. Yeah, no doubt. But I started incorporating that, meditation, and then recently I created this whole kind of practice for myself. It's not in any way original, actually. It's just a morning routine. And I do it pretty much every day. And that is what I've learned about myself, is that I can create a routine and a practice of these 4 things that I do every day: writing, reading, meditating, and exercise. I try to do them all. I wear 4 bracelets that represent each one of them, so I'm reminded of what I have or have not done. And it's working. I don't know if I've answered your question about what I've learned about myself. I don't know that I was prepared, but I guess maybe I always thought I would never give up on my dreams, and I succeeded at all of them. And I think I needed new dreams, because my secondary dream after my career was my kids, and I nailed it. I fucking nailed parenting, because I was always there as much as I could be, and I was always trying to be better. And the things that I screwed up, I tried to fix, and they knew that. And I know I nailed it because my daughters both wrote me letters last year, and in each one of their letters, they wrote something similar to what I wrote to them when they were babies, of who I wanted to be. They confirmed I was that. So that's what I mean by nailing it. Like, I did it. I did a great job with both Val and I, but like in terms of what I thought of myself as, and how I considered being a father as important as any responsibility I had with work. Oh, I have this conference call, I have this meeting, I go on this trip. All those things had to be paired and congruent with parenting responsibilities. Sorry, I have to be with my daughter. She has a show. She has a recital. She has even needs a ride, for me. I had a listener once when I was complaining about having to drive my daughters. I got to drive them everywhere, all over the place. And I said it on live radio, and a listener said, "You will miss that soon." Mm-hmm. And that's all I needed to hear. And I didn't take that for granted for one more second. And so parenting was and continues to be, obviously, Julia's now 16 and 10th grade. She's doing so well. So I think I learned I need new purpose. I need to keep having purpose in my life. And what that is, I'm currently exploring.
How has the adversity of the last few years changed you as a father?
Oh, I think it's made me a better father in most ways, because they've seen me deal with anxiety, and that's been good for them to watch. They know I'm not, ever trying to pass myself off as to being someone. But I was generally in pretty good spirits, and doing well and walking around like I'm a pretty big deal in my life and in my house in front of these 2 girls. And so they saw that. They saw Dad doing all these things, and then they saw Dad fall down. But I don't think they saw it that way. Ava told me when I lost my job, the next job you find is going to be better than this one. I'm not worried about you. Can I leave? Can I leave the room now? And Julia was like, wait, are we going to be poor now? And are you still going to be friends with famous people? And can you just be a doctor now? They dealt with it in their own ways. And they were 15 and 12, I think, at the time, or something around that. Yeah. And I learned that I can be a better parent if I'm around more. I could not have done all the things I've done, especially with Julia, if I was still working in New York City at SiriusXM. I've been with her and done everything that she's possibly needed for the past 3 years, and she knows it and she appreciates it. And so that's really just more time to serve them is how I see it. I see myself as serving them. You have to love your kids. You're supposed to love your kids, but your kids don't have to love you. They didn't ask to be born. I learned that recently. And so I'm happy to serve them, and she doesn't need to give me anything back at all, because her presence is enough of a gift. But this idea, you better appreciate what I'm doing, and this better come back around, is such a canard. No, it's my responsibility and it's my honor to serve her, and I've had more time to do that. So I think that's probably been the biggest thing. But
yeah, they're still going to throw you in a home in a few years.
Yeah, well,
they're going to lock you in.
Yes.
And, on behalf of the listener community, we appreciate how much you share, because it helps us. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I do know that.
Okay.
People tell me, or else I wouldn't. And I'm careful about it because I don't want it to be too much about me. I don't want to be, too self-centered. I also don't want to sound like I'm complaining when a lot of people listening have a lot more challenging issues. So I try to strike a balance there, but I do know that, and I honestly wish I could share more than I do. I would if it wasn't too private. If other people, lives weren't, I can't say everything. No one can, even to their closest friends, much less on your podcast or Facebook. But, I almost wish I could share more, but it's just not always appropriate.
But I think you strike the balance well. And again, part of it's the structure. If you were constantly just interviewing strangers about the book they just wrote, you couldn't be as vulnerable, you couldn't open up. But since you bring in Mark Quint and Christian and these people who are your friends and have these kind of regular dialogues, that's where we get to see how things are going in their life, how things are going in your life. That's what I think makes your podcast more special than the SiriusXM show.
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
And I think your community would agree, because that's where we hear more about you and your daughters and stuff like that. You get a climate change scientist on, you don't get to pontificate about your girls. But,
right. Although Michael Mann and I do sometimes talk about our kids.
But that's the other thing. You in this structure, you have the chance to keep bringing these people back and developing those relationships.
I'm glad that you see it that way. I think that, sometimes people think, it will be like, I'm always going to have new guests every week, but sometimes people might think, this guy's on a lot or whatever. I'm like, every network, every major corporate network has the same correspondents on a lot. The difference is the person that comes on with me a lot, we tend to end up having a lot of personal conversations, and the listener trusts me and that person because we're really putting it all out there, and I don't think put us on a pedestal the way you would somebody like a Jake Tapper and his correspondent Manu Raju or something. You don't know anything about their lives, and they don't want you to know anything about their lives. Same thing with an actor who you really like, or almost any artist who you really like and admire. You go see their shows, but you don't actually know what's going on with Eddie Vedder. Even though you're a huge Pearl Jam fan, and I'm not saying that you're supposed to. There's a place for that. In my podcast isn't that. That's what you're saying.
You're not asking people to come on and give 15-second pithy little, you let them go. You let,
It's a great medium for that.
And that's where we learn. I learned so much that I can take, so when someone makes some crazy comment, I've got Eric Siegel in the back of my mind saying, well, actually, I happen to know from a constitutional scholar, X, Y, and Z.
The 2008 Heller case said, aren't you a garbage man? Yes, but I also read Eric Siegel's stuff.
And you touched on this a little bit. Some of it is, just financial need. We live in a capitalist world. You gotta pay the bills. But what motivates you right now? What drives you? Other than fear of poverty.
This is the greatest job in the world. I never took it for granted at Sirius. Any of the jobs I've had have been awesome. Working at the Colbert Report, Daily Show, and now at John Oliver. Like, all those gigs were on strike, obviously, but are amazing jobs. But the interviewing of smart people and then even the putting together the podcast, the editing of it and everything, the idea that I can make any money doing it, much less being able to, pay my bills right now, is amazing. So, I was so terrified when I lost my job at Sirius that I would never get paid, make money to do that again. And what would I do that would be as enjoyable? So it's the work.
What was plan B? Not that there was a plan B, but if you weren't doing this, Congress tomorrow's like, we're abolishing podcasts. They're gone. What would you do?
I have no idea. I have if I could tomorrow get hired by a nonprofit to do something like Harlem Grown in New York City to work with kids in gardens in New York City and get paid to do that, I'd do that. If I could be in a 7th grade social studies teacher tomorrow, I would do that, but I can't. I don't even have a bachelor's degree.
Because of the incident?
Because of the potential.
They catch you one time.
The potential incidents, which, by the way, are not like inappropriate sexual in nature. It's me ripping a kid's head off because he keeps heckling me.
You kick the shit out of one kid, and they'll never let you be a teacher again.
There will never be an issue where I physically, sexually or physically abuse a child, but I will definitely verbally destroy a child's emotional state to raise myself. And that's one of the reasons I can't be a teacher. And that's one of the reasons I have so much respect for teachers. No, I love kids. I'm really good with kids. And if I could work with kids in some way, I would do that. I don't know. I don't know what I would do, and it's terrifying to try to have to imagine it. I want this to keep going. The dream right now is that when Julia's out of school, I've said this a lot of times, but that I do what I'm doing with you now on a regular basis. I go and I meet listeners. I spend time with them. They introduce me to the important people in their life. Like you're doing, this is such a cool thing. Like today, after we talk, you're bringing me to 3 super smart, very different from each other people that the listeners will love, that I'll interview. Like I want to travel around the country in like an electric van, sleep in the van or truck, whatever it is, and go to people's towns and homes and interview people. I've thought a lot about like living and working in some of the poorest zip codes in the country. Poverty is horrible, but I am more comfortable in impoverished communities than I am in affluent communities. I have a lot more to learn, and I want to help, and I want to make a difference. And I've spent so much time around really affluent people because of my work. We aren't, in that circle, but because of my work, I've been around, and I hate them. I really don't like most of them. I'm very judgmental of it, and I have a lot of issues around that. I'm not comfortable with it. I feel like so. There's a lot of ideas, but, making money at any of those things, enough to be able to support myself, much less my family. But I've also become a real minimalist, which I heard is a thing now. Like, it's becoming trendy to be a minimalist, even for, like, I don't know, materialistic folks, or I don't know, what we would call ourselves. You want a house? You want things in it? You want cars? I'm increasingly becoming, like, the idea, I work in a shed, and that's really helped me. Like I have this small space, it's minimal, and I just want my skis. I want my knees to work every day in my meditation. I am grateful for all my joints being healthy. I want to take care of my joints so that when Julia's out of school, I can travel the country, I can run, I can ski, I can hike with listeners. Like that's what I want to do. I want to help. I want to make a difference.
Well, you do that.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
The concept of retirement scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
When you look down the road, is there an end of the rainbow? Is there a
nope?
Like how does Chisel D spend his days?
My dad, aka Chisel D, I will not be him. I'm sure of it. Never have been, but he's teaches race car driving to rich guys with Porsches and Corvettes and BMWs a couple days a week. He teaches skiing, although he's done teaching skiing, but he skis. He rides his bike. And he is really, my mom and him obviously still married, 52 years, and so that's him. That won't be me. I don't think. I'll probably. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think. I try not to think about it because it scares the hell out of me. I think I'll always work and interview people. I hope. Can't imagine not doing this work because it makes me feel important and purposeful. But I don't know. I'll probably die before I'm 60. I think a lot. I don't know. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll live to be 100, but there's so much uncertainty in life that the idea of retirement scares the shit out of me for financial reasons, for the degradation of your body and your mind and how that might be, for losing your friends, all those terrible, awful things, although there's a lot of research that says we get happier as we get older. So I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, and maybe I should because I'd be more responsible, but I just feel that I really believe, as cheesy as it sounds, I've kind of always believed this, that each day is a gift. Like, I've seen enough. 9/11 is what taught me this, being in New York that day, which is why when I say goodbye to my girls, when I drop them off at school, their friends, whenever I say goodbye to them for a moment, I always say, eyes. And they look back, and then usually they roll them at me. But eye contact, because the next minute is not guaranteed. I get hit by a truck, have an aneurysm, so this is the eyes. And that's how I live my life. So it might be a little bit irresponsible financially and not planning, but I just think that, with everything going on in the world and the way that I live my life, I don't know. I don't know where I'll be in 3 years, which is my current short-term goal. I'm 47. I'll be 50. 3 years. Julia goes to college, hopefully. And I'm out on the road, probably. Or, living somewhere else for sure. And doing what I love is what I hope. But, get a disease,
You never know.
You think about that. Every time someone your age when you're in your 40s and 50s, it's still like too young, even in your 60s, like has some kind of pancreatic cancer or horrible thing and like dies. It's like, fuck that. Why not me? Why is that not me? That guy had, everything and whatever. He was a great person. Why not me? So I don't, that's how I live, like pretty tenuously, I think.
Well, it's a good reminder. Staying present is hard, but you role model it well.
Staying present,
it's hard,
is the most important thing a man, I'll say a man, but for certainly a woman, people can do. And I have a really strong practice at that. I firmly believe that, and I have thought and read and practiced mindfulness for years now, and I'm pretty good at it because my morning meditation helps me stay present during the day. So when my mind starts to wander, I'm able to see it. And it's everything. It is everything. This isn't me. This is thousands of years of Buddhism, really, and reading Pema Chodron now. I'm constantly. I read every morning. I read about impermanence and mindfulness, coming back to the moment. And then in my meditation today, I started thinking I need to text Ava something, my daughter, and I started writing the text. And then a voice comes in and says, "Come on back to your breath." And then during the day, when I'm not meditating and my mind starts to wander, I can catch that and come back to the moment, especially if it's a negative thought. That's when I need to do it the most. And not to jump all over you with that, but that's you said it, you named it. Being present is hard, but it's everything, according to millennia of philosophers.
Your morning practice is impressive. I did not need to see the naked squats at the end. I thought that was too much.
Oh, I didn't know you were in
when I
there
walked.
yet.
Well, yeah, but you should probably get that left one checked out.
There's only one. You didn't know?
What?
Yeah, it's still, it's there. It hasn't descended.
Oh, no. Maybe that was...
They're tiny. They're tiny.
But
testicles.
they worked. You have two daughters.
The golden gun.
Thank you for what you do every day on behalf of all of us who, it's important. I look forward to getting that little Patreon notice in my email that you posted a new show. I look forward to it. I drive a lot in my work, and you keep me company on those drives. I learn from the people. I laugh, and we appreciate all you do, and we will just stay with you on this journey, and it's our job to help keep promoting the show and help you grow this so that you don't have to worry so much about the financial side.
I really appreciate you saying all that. I have one question for you and everybody listening. It does pertain to something you said, like kind of what keeps you going. Like when you work for yourself, I have a lot to learn from self-employed people. I wish some of the self-employed people, more of you would reach out to me because there's all these daily things that you have to do to motivate yourself to get things done, to have deadlines. You have no boss, maybe. You have clients, you have contracts, you have certain deadlines. But like I really am very autonomous. So I have deadlines for myself. I try to post a show every day by midnight. And if I can't, because I'm forgiving of myself, because life happens a lot, then I want the second deadline is by 6 a.m. so that people on the East Coast at least will wake up, hopefully, and have it there because it's a daily thing. But there are times when I don't get it up. And I want to know. And I'm not.
I think they have a pill for that now.
I'm not talking about my penis. You keep coming back to my penis, which is fine because we're both naked. But... and it's there, and it's kind of the elephant in the room, or in my case, it's a different animal. And
the shrew in the room.
I wonder, I always wonder, like, I don't want to disappoint people that expect the podcast, and I feel like I'm letting them down, which is an okay feeling because it motivates me to get my work done because my work matters, as you said. Like, my work matters. My friend Joe Liotta, who I hope will listen to this, said to me, your work matters so much to so many of us. And I wrote it on a Post-it note, and I put it up in the shed, and I see it there every day. And it motivates me because I'm not just doing like a podcast that no one's listening to. Like, it's there. And so when it's not there at the time that people expect it, I feel like I'm letting people down, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't paralyze me. But I try to get it up, the podcast, for people at a certain time so it's there and that they can have a certain reliance on, which has been hard to take time off. But I finally did it this year, and it was 100% worth it.
What does 1,000 show when you cross that timeline? What's that going to feel like?
No different than it's just like...
It's a big number, though.
Yeah, I don't think about those kind of... I don't know. It's not an ego thing. I just think I'm not organized enough, to think about what the significance of a certain number of things. People have asked me throughout my career in interviews or just talking what's next, and I'm like, tomorrow's show. Yeah. Tomorrow's show has got to be good. I want it to be good, and when there's technical issues or when it's not as good as I want it to be, I feel like I've let down. Tomorrow I have to do a really good show, and it's very hard to do a really good show. So I'm focused on tomorrow's show, and if it's 1,000, then I'm just grateful that people are willing to pay for it, because I wouldn't do it without being able to make a living. It's not a choice. I have to make money to support my girls. They're in school now and college, and myself. So I don't think that much about it. I'm just super grateful that it's still going. I keep thinking it's going to end and that people are all going to cancel their subscriptions overnight. I'm going to say something, I'm going to do something, and I got nothing. And so I just am psyched that when, people are still subscribing, although we've got to keep replacing,
Yeah. You're not going to get canceled. It's just going to keep growing. It's a great show. I think the challenge right now is just marketing, right?
Yep.
And so I like the idea of you getting out on the road, meeting more people.
There's a new podcast network I'm most likely joining. I'm trying, and it's a tough move. It's just a lot of work.
It's a crowded space. I mean,
oh my God, what's more crowded? But
music. But
fair enough. But it's a daily podcast. It's got, I don't have to sell it at this point in our conversation, much less on the podcast. But I think that it's always, we get amazing people. You're going to introduce me to 3 people, one of which I've met before, but he's amazing. And we keep pumping out these great conversations that amazing authors and journalists and scholars and artists, and that's the value of it to people. And if you don't like this person, fine. I got another one coming in a day or an hour. Another guest. You don't like Eric Siegel? Well, you love Dahlia Lithwick. You don't love Dahlia Lithwick? You love Chrissy Greer. You don't love Chrissy Greer? Well, you love Christian Finnegan. I just have this plethora of amazing people that say yes to me, and I think that's the secret to success, is that people say yes to talking to me and letting me record it.
Well, that's a reflection on who you are.
It damn well is.
Thank you for doing this.
I'm Kevin Costner. Thank you for listening.
Where's my wife?
All right, there it is. Did you really listen? Really listen to that? What did you think? Did you learn anything? Was it helpful? Was it self-indulgent? Was it something that I had to throw up because I didn't have anything else? Yeah. I hope you appreciated it and got something from it. If you did, I'd love to know. Email me, reach out however you want. We can talk about it at the Hangout, whatever. I thank you very, very much for being here today. That was quite a special thing for me to be able to do, and Mark is a special guy to do it. So Mark Nolte, thank you very much, and thank you for listening, supporting the show. Go write a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and subscribe on YouTube and TikTok and Threads and Blue Sky and all of the rest. Can't do any of it without your paid subscription. It's a free show, but it ain't cheap. So sign up now at patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Jon Carroll taking us out, as he always does.
Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in. before the change could begin, they had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand